President John Brown glared with rage at the transmission. 1 million humans and another million robots are missing after a Bavragan mercenary incursion. The local militia fleet of 6 battleships which assembled to fend them off was destroyed to the last man. They sent this notification to us. You should have given in to our demands when they were made, humans. As we told you before, we will always collect payment, if not in credits and resources, then in blood and plunder. 2, we have not forgotten that you played host to the defeated fool. You will pay for that too. We will always be paid what we are owed. Do not forget that. President Brown's knuckles turned white. His wild, fanatical eyes stared on, a silent curse flowing from the depths of his soul at the outrage, and that outrage was boiling in his guts. It boiled and heated until it erupted in a shout of fury. Remember? Oh yes, I will remember. We will remember. I will never forget, and you will be paid what you are owed. The one problem with fighting the Bavragan wasn't that they were like the sacred dark of years prior. It wasn't even that they were not the crazed religious fanatics, but were instead pragmatic and callous exploiters of opportunity, and so would do whatever was in their interests. No, the problem was their location. Seated on the border of the Terran Republic and the Ascended Co., they lived in a no-man's land. They had amassed a fortune in protection money from various states, and such was their military renown that they drew aspiring pirates from all social corners, even from species that the Republic had yet to identify. To attack their territory was to rile the Ascended Co., and that was something John did not want to do. Still, the war is going well, he thought, and flipped on the TRN, Terran Republic News, to see what they were reporting on. On screen, tens of thousands of people were cheering, crying, screaming with glee, and the target of their affections? The waving figures on parade. The first group of human slaves had made it home, liberated after a ground operation deep inside Intakana space, along with a handful of slaves sent back when the Matakari surrendered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The cry of the former captives was shouted until voices were hoarse, and tearful reunions were filmed for posterity. Husbands and wives embraced, children clung to newly returned parents, and in a cynical fashion, the newscaster remarked on an opinion poll that showed his approval rating at 95%. President Brown snorted. I only serve one term. I don't care what the poll says. I'm just doing my job. What a way to ruin a moment like that. Still, he enjoyed the reunions vicariously and called up the latest reports on the conflict. The Julian surrender would be breaking news soon. They occupied only one system, but to the average citizen, it was yet another member of the Confederacy collapsing completely. Only the smarter people would note that they were so insignificant. Their resistance was a mere token one, and they'd been dragged into the Confederation as a choice between that and enslavement. By comparison, they'll enjoy being citizens of the Republic once they understand what that means. The president thought to himself and began mentally preparing for his speech. The entry of the Bavragan into the war would be a shock to most people, but what was important was not what happened, but rather how people saw it. To that end, President Brown kept the volume low and kept an ear half open to the news while he waited for the inevitable report. I'll need to make a statement, something to set the tone for what lies ahead. His mind raced ahead on a single track of thought, barreling forward faster than a ship down a hyperlane. It came to the only answer, just as the first report filtered in on the screen. He turned an eye toward it to watch the reporter, a young woman no doubt in her 20s, her eyes horrified at what she was saying, tell the Republic what he already knew. The thousands dead, the missing, the shattered militia fleet. John got up from behind his desk and went to stand on the holopad in his office. There he waited until the request reached him for commentary. Before he answered, he scrolled through the list of comments and the trend of social communications. Are we supposed to fight everybody? How could this happen? Can we really just keep going like this? Fear was a common sentiment. Fear was the enemy, worse than any armada of any people. He tapped the press connection indicator, and as his image appeared in front of every reporter requesting a comment, he jumped ahead of them all and began to speak. The friendship will not happen twice. That was the promise made so long ago by President Taylor. We have kept that promise year after year through each administration. However, we must not forget the lesson that came with it, that contact with those who share not our ways is dangerous beyond words. They come with fire to instill fear in you, to take your children and yourselves as slaves, to destroy everything we value, from our freedoms to our families. Even now, as we welcome the first of our people home, more were taken from us, showing that there is no safety for mankind except in victory, that freedom can only be bought with blood, either ours or those who would take it from us. His rage was on full display, and his fierce, fanatical gaze seemed to lock on every man and woman who looked his way, whether he could see them or not. We will not be taken from. We will not be crushed. The Republic will spread out to cover every threat to us until there are no threats left. If they bring us war, we will bring the war to their doorstep. Look on the marked faces and hungry bodies of those who have come home from bondage. Will we let that happen to us all? I will not even if I have to fight from the very steps of the center of government. Not if I have to use my ancient desk as cover while I fire a rifle myself. They say they will give us death if we do not give up our liberty, and I say, give me liberty or give me death. Fear became rage as patriotic music began to play, orchestrated by his press secretary, and though he couldn't be sure, at their prompting it was likely that when the enlistment options appeared on screens around the Republic, that was her doing. Within hours of his speech, the Republic Senate had a one-page bill in front of them for voting, and this one-page bill had only one sentence. Let it be resolved that the Terran Defense Force shall have no restrictions on the budget or staff of its fleet or ground troops for the next 4 years, or until the war is brought to its conclusion, whichever comes first. Were it not for the now quiet rage that seethed inside of President Brown, he would have called it a very good day. How? How are they doing it? Praxajan's arms wrapped around his head to hide his face, and the horror he felt. It was only polite to do, and dire situation or not, but remembering his manners did nothing to change the dire nature of their situation. Why is a better question, cousin, Rorona remarked. His eyes were half closed with weariness, but in spite of the physical symptoms, his voice at least was as level and focused as ever. I think I can answer how easily enough. Fine, start with how and then we can get to why, Praxa exclaimed, and for once, with the absence of their highest priest, Rorona could relax and give his answer without fear of interruption. They are using the Kana Liberation Front. Finding the hyperlanes should have taken time, collectively buying us months to raise more defenses, but, as you know, some members of the Kana rebellion managed to flee into the territory of the Terran Republic. I'm sure they're aiding our enemies, providing them with maps, layouts of defenses, anything they know of our territory, and since their race served as slaves all over our empire, I have no doubt the Terrans arrived in these systems already knowing what they needed to. We're scrambling to meet them, and we've destroyed a few ships, but cousin, we may need to surrender soon, if for no other reason than the Kana will want their crack at revenge. He reflexively looked at the place usually occupied by their mutual cousin, and it was almost odd to not hear the accusation of blasphemy being hurled his way. But odd or not, it remained a relief. Praxa unwrapped his arms as he forced his expression to one of neutrality. Then, why? Why are they doing that? As I tried to warn you before, Praxa, Rorona said as gently as he could. Cousin or not, he was still their ruler. Humans are often motivated more by principle than practicality. We enslaved their people, and for some reason that makes them very prickly. I admit, it is strange that they aren't enslaving the Kana. Perhaps they will later. But it appears to me that they employ a strange form of belief they call egalitarianism or equality. It makes all people equal under their laws, and they apply that even to species that are not their own. Preposterous. They exterminated the sacred dark, did they not? Not to mention the Idiaxa. Praxa's objection was meant to be a gotcha, but Rorona quickly denied it. No, the Idiaxa was imprisoned, but their people are now citizens. The sacred dark were made to give up their fleet life and now live on Terran Empire worlds. I thought for sure that I would find, as you did, extermination or slavery, but I found neither. And what spies report back from worlds where large numbers of the Kana live tell us that they set the Kana free and enlist them into their empire as free citizens. Rorona wanted to wrap up his own head in the same way, but he kept his expression blank and his hands folded together on the table. To put it bluntly, cousin, we're not only fighting humans. Battle reports on the ground report the presence of Idiaxa, Sacred Dark, and other minor species in their ranks. Few, but they are present, and they fight well. We are losing more because we have enemies in our own homes than because we have enemies outside of them. Rorona's words were an unthinkable admission, not just in that he acknowledged their steady defeat, but also the blasphemous reason of why they were being overthrown. A minor beep caught Praxa's attention. He tapped the source, and his body shook as he grew giddy. We are not going to lose now, Rorona. The Bavragan have attacked Terran worlds, and the Ko are on the move. If we hold on, they will be forced to retreat, and we can take back all that was lost, crush the Kana again, and then take the fight to the Empire of Man, turn this whole war around, and have so many slaves at our disposal that we will need to cull half their numbers just to make them manageable. This day hasn't ended so badly after all. Praxa said with a delightful air about him that Rorona could not mimic. The gods bless us after all. The House of Jean will rule for 1,000 cycles no matter what the humans try to do. Isn't that marvelous? Praxa's mood underwent a sudden turnaround, but as for Rorona, it did not. He answered only, yes, marvelous. It was the very first lie of his life. Target their atmospheric defenses and clear a landing spot for ground troops. Do it the usual way and keep the casualties as low as possible, Admiral Pike ordered. The usual way involved clearing substantial space outside of cities, occupying all areas where large quantities of food were grown and water was supplied, and then simply cutting supplies of both off from the population until the planetary government capitulated. All attempts at relief were destroyed by bombardment from above, and within a week or two, the planet would either devolve into chaos, infighting, or riots, and eventually surrender. She recalled an expression she learned at the academy. Any civilization, no matter how powerful, is only 9 meals away from collapse. While the Intakana seemed able to hold out at least a little bit better than the average human before devolving into violence to feed their offspring, she generally thought, that reflects either their religious devotion or their fear of their own government, or more likely both. But even so, it seems to hold true to within a 3-day period. The record was 12 days before surrender, with the fastest being on the same day under the watch of a particularly wise governor. She watched as the explosions detonated over Intakana military ground installations with the destruction of atmospheric weaponry. By now, they would have known to remove their personnel and scatter them, most likely into the cities where the fleet rarely struck. But even so, it would cost them many supplies, and more survivors meant more food was needed. The wide ships of the Terran ground forces began to move into position, hovering over at least 100 points on the world, and at a single beep, they began to descend in unison. Whoever is laying out their defenses is at least clever enough. They've started contesting our landings at their farmlands. She thought as the view switched to closer view through the camera of a transport ship.